Put to me you are one. The sky above Earth was quiet that morning, just like any other. Birds flew over the green hills of Colorado, cars rolled down highways, and kids walked to school with backpacks full of books and dreams. No one knew that in a few hours everything would change, not because of a storm or an earthquake, but because of something coming from far beyond the stars. High above the planet, near the silent curve of the moon, a ship appeared. It was not human. It shimmered like liquid silver, long and smooth with no sharp edges, no visible engines, no windows. It simply hung there, watching. This was the Harmony of Stars, flagship of the Galactic Concordance, a union of over 200 alien civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. To them, Earth was a footnote, a young, noisy world full of squabbling humans who had only just learned to leave their own planet. Inside the ship, High Arbiter Vexel stood on the command deck, his tall, slender frame wrapped in robes of deep violet. His eyes, large and black like polished stone, stared at the blue-green marble below. He did not feel anger. He felt disappointment. In his mind, humanity was like a child playing with fire, dangerous not because it was strong, but because it did not understand its own weakness. "Send the message," he said, his voice calm but firm. A beam of light shot from the ship, not a weapon, but a signal. It carried words in every major human language, translated by machines that had studied Earth's broadcasts for decades. The message was simple. Earth had 30 days to surrender all colonies beyond Earth, shut down its advanced propulsion research, and accept permanent oversight by the Concordance. If they refused, the Concordance would act to preserve galactic stability. In plain words, war. On Earth, the message spread instantly. Phones buzzed, televisions flickered, emergency alerts blared from every city. People stopped in the streets. Some cried. Some shouted. Others just stood still, staring at the sky as if expecting the stars to fall. But deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, in a room lined with steel and silence, a different reaction unfolded. General Leo Hayes sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by officers in dark uniforms. Maps of the solar system glowed on the walls. Data streams scrolled across screens too fast for most eyes to follow. Outside, the world trembled. Inside, there was only quiet focus. Leo leaned back in his chair. He was in his late 50s, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of sleepless nights. He crossed his arms and let out a low chuckle, not mocking, not nervous, but almost relieved. "They finally showed up," he said. Around the table, no one panicked. Captain Eli Dawson, young and sharp-eyed, tapped a command into his tablet. "Orbital sensors confirm it's a Concordance Envoy-class vessel. No weapons charged. They're making a statement, not starting a fight. Yet." Dr. Lena Ortiz, the lead scientist from the Amazon Orbital Lab, spoke next. Her voice was steady. "They think we're still using chemical rockets and radio waves. They don't know about the grav lens arrays or the quantum comms net." Leo nodded. For over 40 years, Earth had been preparing, not for invasion, but for this exact moment. After the climate wars, after the near collapse of the 2040s, the nations of Earth had quietly agreed on one thing. They would never be helpless again. They pooled resources, shared secrets, and built defenses hidden in plain sight. Solar satellites that looked like junk? They were railgun platforms. Mining drones near Ceres? They carried stealth drones armed with plasma cutters. Even the new generation of cargo ships had warp-capable cores locked and waiting. The world saw peace. The Concordance saw weakness, but Earth knew the truth. Up in orbit, the Harmony of Stars waited for a reply. They expected fear. They expected begging. What they got was silence. Back on the surface, President Nora Blake addressed the United Nations within the hour. She stood tall, her dark hair pulled back, her voice clear and calm. "We have received an ultimatum from an alien alliance. They demand our surrender. We will not comply." The crowd gasped, but she continued. "We do not seek war, but we will not give up our freedom, our future, or our children's right to choose their own path." Her words were broadcast everywhere. In Tokyo, a factory worker turned off his machine and stood a little straighter. In Lagos, students gathered in the square not to protest but to organize. In Buenos Aires, engineers opened secure channels and began running diagnostics on systems they hadn't touched in years. And in Houston, in a small workshop tucked behind a university lab, Danny Ruiz adjusted the focus ring on a prototype gravitic lens. He was only 24, with grease on his hands and coffee in a chipped mug. On his screen, a simulation showed how a focused gravity pulse could bend light and tear through alien shielding like tissue paper. He didn't look scared. He looked focused. When his friend asked if he was worried, Danny just smiled faintly and said, "Guess they finally noticed we stopped blinking." That phrase spread faster than the original warning. On social feeds, in newsrooms, in military briefings, it became a quiet anthem. Humanity hadn't been idle. While the galaxy slept on its old rules, Earth had been learning, building, and waiting. By nightfall, the Concordance still had no answer from Earth's governments. But they didn't need one. The silence itself was the reply. And in that silence, something new stirred. Not panic, but purpose. Leo Hayes stood at the observation window of the bunker, looking up at the stars. He thought of his father, who had survived the food riots of '39, and his daughter now training as a pilot in the Lunar Defense Corps. He thought of all the times Earth had been knocked down and always stood back up. "They think we're primitives," he whispered. "Let them." Outside, the first of Earth's hidden defense platforms powered on, their systems humming to life in the cold dark. No alarms sounded. No lights flashed. Just a quiet readiness like a hand closing around a hilt. The galaxy had declared war. And Earth, for the first time in its history, was ready to fight back, not with rage, but with a calm, knowing smirk. Because deep down humanity had always known this day would come, and they had been waiting. Part 2. The days after the ultimatum should have been filled with fear. Instead, something strange happened across Earth. People did not hide. They gathered. They talked. They worked. In cities, towns, and villages, neighbors who had barely spoken before now shared tools, food, and ideas. Schools stayed open, but lessons changed. Students learned about orbital mechanics, signal encryption, and emergency response, not because they were being forced, but because they wanted to help. Social media, once full of arguments and noise, turned into something new. A teenager in Jakarta posted a drawing of Earth as a sleeping wolf, one eye open, teeth hidden, but ready. It was shared millions of times. In Detroit, a retired mechanic named Carl Jenkins rebuilt an old drone in his garage and live-streamed the whole thing, explaining how to boost its range using parts from a microwave. Comments poured in from every continent. "Thank you, Grandpa, you're a legend." The phrase "they finally noticed we stopped blinking" became more than a joke. It became a promise. People wore it on shirts, painted it on walls, whispered it like a secret code. It meant we saw you watching. We knew you'd come, and we're ready. President Nora Blake gave another speech, this time from the steps of the rebuilt Lincoln Memorial. The sun was setting behind her, casting long shadows over the reflecting pool. She wore a simple gray suit, no medals, no flags waving dramatically behind her. Just her, the stone pillars, and the quiet strength in her voice. "We are not asking for war," she said, "but we will not kneel. Not to fear. Not to threats. Not to anyone who thinks our future is theirs to decide." Behind her, unnoticed by most viewers, a row of satellites shifted position in geosynchronous orbit. They looked like ordinary communication relays, dull metal boxes with solar panels. But inside, fusion cores hummed to life and targeting systems locked onto deep space coordinates. These were the first line of Earth's silent shield, built over decades under the name Project Warden. No one outside the inner defense circle knew they existed. Now they were awake. In Houston, Danny Ruiz stood in front of a wall-sized display in a secure lab buried under 3 layers of concrete. His hands moved fast over the controls, calibrating the final test for the gravitic lens array. Beside him, his teammate, a quiet woman named Priya Mehta, monitored energy flow. "Stability at 98%, she said. "We can hold it for 12 minutes before thermal buildup forces a cooldown." Danny nodded. "That's more than enough." He didn't smile, but there was a spark in his eyes. This wasn't just theory anymore. This was real. In 2 weeks, those lenses would be mounted on the Iron Harvesting, a ship most people thought was just a deep space ore hauler. It wasn't. It was a hunter. Meanwhile, in Nevada, Captain Eli Dawson walked through a long underground tunnel lit by red emergency lights. The air smelled of ozone and metal. He stopped at a sealed door marked Sector Theta. A retinal scan, a voice print, and the door slid open. Inside, rows of drone pods stood in perfect silence. Each one was no bigger than a backpack, but packed with AI micro-thrusters and shaped plasma charges. These were the Wasps, autonomous, fast, and deadly. Pilots didn't fly them with joysticks. They linked to them through neural interfaces, feeling the drones, as if they were their own limbs. Eli placed his hand on the nearest pod. "You've trained for this," he told the young pilot beside him, a kid named Marcus Boone who joined the program straight out of high school. "Trust your instincts. The Concordance fights by the book." "We don't." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He'd lost his older brother in the Titan mining accident 5 years ago, a disaster many now believed was caused by a hidden Concordance probe sabotaging life support. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for justice. Back in orbit, the harmony of stars still waited. High Arbiter Vexel grew uneasy. Earth's silence was not the silence of surrender. It was the silence of preparation. His advisors suggested sending a second message, harsher this time. But Vexal hesitated. Something felt wrong. Human broadcasts showed no panic, no mass evacuations, no pleas for mercy. Instead, they showed classrooms, workshops, and farms, people living their lives but with a new kind of focus. Then came the first sign that Earth was not what they thought. A Concordance scout ship, patrolling near the asteroid belt, vanished. No explosion, no distress call, just gone. At first, they assumed a malfunction. But when a second scout disappeared near Jupiter's moons, alarms sounded across the fleet. What they didn't know was that Earth's hidden shipyards had been active for weeks. Beneath the dusty surface of the moon, inside hollowed-out asteroids and even tucked into the shadow of Mars' moon Deimos, human vessels were emerging from camouflage. The Liberty's Resolve, a cruiser disguised as a research station, powered up its engines for the first time. Its hull was lined with adaptive stealth plating that bent radar and light around it like water. On board, engineers ran final checks on weapons that fired compressed gravity waves, technology the Concordance didn't even know was possible. General Leo Hayes watched the reports come in from his command center. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply said, "Good, they're learning." Down on Earth, life went on, but faster, sharper, more connected. Farmers used encrypted mesh networks to share weather data that doubled as signal jamming tests. Fishermen in the Pacific adjusted their sonar to detect not just fish, but anomalies in the ionosphere. Even children played new games, Concordance or human, where they guessed which tech was real and which was a decoy. The world was turning into a single quiet machine, and every person was a gear. Then, one evening, a video appeared online. It showed Danny Ruiz in his lab, holding a small device that looked like a flashlight. He turned it on. A beam of distorted space shot out, bending the air like heat haze. Then he aimed it at a metal plate. The plate didn't melt, it simply unraveled, its atoms pulled apart by focused gravity shear. The video ended with Danny looking straight into the camera and saying, "Guess they finally noticed we stopped blinking." The Concordance intercepted the video. Their scientists were baffled. Their commanders were alarmed. How could a species they dismissed as primitive wield physics like this? On Earth, no one answered. They just kept working. President Blake visited a shipyard in low orbit, floating in microgravity beside workers welding the final plates onto the iron harvest. She didn't give a speech. She just shook hands, asked questions, and listened. When a young welder named Rosa asked if she was scared, Blake smiled softly and said, "I'm scared for them." Because Earth wasn't just defending itself. It was showing the galaxy something new, a civilization that didn't need to conquer to be strong, that could stand tall without shouting, that could smirk not out of arrogance but because it had spent a century getting ready for this exact moment. And as the 30th day approached, the Concordance realized too late that they hadn't declared war on a child, they had woken a giant. Part 3. The Concordance did not wait for the 30th day. On the 28th morning, their fleet jumped into the Sol system near Mars. 12 silver dreadnoughts emerged from warp space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the red planet's dusty light. They moved with the calm certainty of an empire that had never lost a war. Their mission was simple: disable Earth's orbital defenses, cripple its shipyards, and force surrender before humanity could even react. They expected chaos. They expected outdated weapons firing blindly into the void. What they found was silence and then fire. From the dark side of Phobos, a moon so small it was often ignored, a network of hidden platforms activated. These were not ships. They were weapons built into the rock itself, quantum-entangled tachyon lances, each one powered by miniaturized fusion cores buried deep underground. The concordant sensors saw nothing until it was too late. One moment, their lead dreadnought was broadcasting a final warning to Earth. The next, a beam of distorted spacetime sliced through its shields like glass. The ship did not explode. It simply folded in on itself, vanishing into a silent implosion of twisted metal and light. Alarms blared across the Concordance fleet. Commanders shouted orders in languages no human had ever heard. But before they could reposition, more beams struck from Ceres, from the Lagrange points, even from disguised satellites orbiting Venus. In 7 minutes and 23 seconds, 4 more dreadnoughts were gone. The rest scattered, their perfect formation shattered. On Earth, Captain Eli Dawson sat in a reinforced bunker beneath the Nevada desert. His eyes were closed, but his hands moved fast over a neural interface pad. Around him, a dozen pilots sat in linked chairs, their minds synced to drone swarms light minutes away. These were the Wasps, tiny, fast, and smart. They didn't attack head-on. They slipped between the Concordance ships like ghosts, jamming comms, overloading shield harmonics, and planting microcharges on engine nacelles. Eli felt every turn, every burst of thrust as if he were flying himself. He guided a group of Wasps toward a damaged Concordance cruiser trying to retreat. The drones latched onto its hull, then detonated in sequence, peeling the armor open like a can. Inside, alien crew members scrambled in panic. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. No grand speeches, no honor duels, just cold, efficient strikes from the shadows. Meanwhile, near Jupiter, the Liberty's resolve uncloaked. Its captain, a quiet woman named Rosa Mendez, gave a single order. Target their command ship. Disable, don't destroy. The cruiser's gravitic cannons charged, humming with stored energy. A pulse fired, not a beam but a ripple in space itself. It hit the Concordance flagship's bridge, not with heat or force but with a gravity shear that scrambled every system on board. Lights died. Engines stalled. The ship drifted, blind and helpless. Back on Earth, people watched the battle unfold on public feeds. Scientists had hacked into the Concordance's own broadcast channels and were streaming the fight live. In schools, students saw alien ships fall not to brute force but to clever traps and human ingenuity. In hospitals, doctors paused between surgeries to glance at wall screens showing Earth's hidden fleet, rising from the asteroid belt like wolves from the snow. Danny Ruiz stood on the bridge of the Iron Harvest, his hands steady on the lens controls. This was his first real combat test. His job was not to kill but to blind. He aimed the gravitic lens at a Concordance sensor array orbiting Mars. A pulse fired. The array didn't break. It warped, its signals twisted into nonsense. Now the enemy was fighting half-blind. High Arbiter Vexel watched from the harmony of stars, now safely behind the front lines. His face, usually calm, showed something new. Confusion. How did they know our entry vector? He asked his advisors. How do they counter our shield frequencies before we even broadcast them? No one had an answer. What they didn't know was that for years Earth had been listening. Every stray signal, every diplomatic broadcast, every piece of alien tech recovered from old wrecks had been studied, copied, and countered. Humanity hadn't just built weapons, it had built understanding. On the moon, engineers in sealed domes worked through the night, launching repair drones to fix damaged platforms. In orbit, cargo ships that once carried food and medicine now ferried ammunition and spare parts to the front lines. Even civilian networks helped. Amateur radio operators jammed enemy signals using modified kitchen microwaves, while gamers used virtual reality rigs to simulate enemy tactics for real-time strategy updates. The Concordance tried to regroup near the asteroid belt, but Earth's forces pressed the advantage. The Iron Harvest led a strike group of modified freighters, each one packed with hidden weapons. They didn't look like warships. That was the point. The Concordance scanned for military signatures, and found nothing until the first plasma round tore through their flank. Sergeant Marcus Boone piloted a stealth shuttle through the debris field, planting sensor buoys that mapped enemy movements in real time. He thought of his brother, lost on Titan, and whispered, "This is for you," as he triggered a mine that crippled a Concordance supply vessel. By the end of the day, The Concordance had lost 8 capital ships and over 30 support craft. Earth had lost 2 drone carriers and a single orbital platform. Damaged, not destroyed. The numbers told a story the galaxy had never heard before. A young species, alone and outnumbered, had not just held its ground. It had won the first battle. But Earth did not celebrate with fireworks or victory parade. There was no gloating. Instead, President Blake addressed the world again, her voice calm. We defended our home. We did not seek this fight, but we will finish it if we must. In the Concordance fleet, whispers began. Some commanders questioned the wisdom of the ultimatum. Others demanded more ships, more firepower. But doubt had taken root. If humans could do this with hidden tech and clever tactics, what else were they hiding? General Leo Hayes stood in his war room, watching the final reports come in. He didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time, the galaxy saw Earth not as a backwater but as a threat, and that, he thought, was exactly what they needed. Because Earth wasn't trying to scare the Concordance. It was trying to teach them a lesson. Never underestimate a species that spent a century learning how to survive. Part 4. After the battle near Mars, the Concordance did not retreat. But something deeper than fear began to spread through their ranks, doubt. Their ships were built for order, for predictable enemies who followed rules of engagement written centuries ago. Humanity did not play by those rules. They used garbage satellites as weapons, turned mining drones into killers, and fought with a mix of science and street-smart tricks that made no sense to alien minds. The Concordance had expected a child with a stick. They found a shadow with a knife. High Arbiter Vexal called an emergency council aboard the Harmony of Stars. Holograms of leaders from a dozen species flickered in the chamber, their faces tight with worry. We underestimated them, admitted Krell, a reptilian commander from the Vexian hegemony. Their technology is not just advanced, it is strange. It does not match any known origin. Vexal nodded slowly. They did not steal it. They built it. That truth settled over the room like cold fog. For the first time, the Concordance wondered if humanity had been hiding not just weapons but knowledge. While the galaxy shared science through formal academies and slow consensus, Earth had moved fast, messy, and free. They failed, learned, failed again, and kept going. That was not weakness. That was strength the Concordance had never seen. On Earth, life continued, but with a new rhythm. Factories that once made cars now produced sensor arrays. Schools taught coding alongside history. Even artists helped. Painters designed camouflage patterns for ships. Musicians composed soundscapes to test neural interface stress levels. Everyone had a role. No one was left out. Dr. Lena Ortiz stood in her lab above the Amazon rainforest, watching data flow across a dozen screens. She had just activated Project Chimera, a biosynthetic AI grown from human neural tissue and quantum processors. It did not think like a machine. It dreamed like a person, and it could predict enemy movements. By reading tiny ripples in subspace, ripples the Concordance didn't even know they left behind. Chimera says their next move is a feint toward Europa, she told General Hayes over a secure line. They'll send 3 ships to draw us out, then strike at our lunar shipyards with a hidden strike force. Hayes didn't hesitate. Then we let them think they're winning. He ordered the Liberty's Resolve to pretend to chase the decoy fleet, while the real defenses waited in the moon's shadow. It was a trap built on trust in their tech, in their people, and in the strange, wild mind of humanity. Meanwhile, Sergeant Marcus Boone trained for his next mission. He would lead a small team onto a damaged Concordance scout ship drifting near Saturn's rings. Their goal was not to destroy it. It was to board it, plant a data spike, and broadcast a message across the enemy's own network. The message was simple. You declared war on a species that rebuilt itself after nuclear winters, plagues, and climate collapse. We don't break, we evolve. The words were written by a high school student in Nairobi, chosen from thousands of submissions. President Blake had approved it without change. It wasn't a threat, it was a fact. Marcus and his team launched in a stealth pod shaped like space debris. They moved slow, quiet, using the ring's ice particles to hide their heat signature. When they reached the scout ship, its power was low, its crew gone. Inside, the walls pulsed with soft blue light, and the air smelled like ozone and something sweet like burnt fruit. Marcus placed the data spike near the main comm relay. As it synced, he looked at the alien symbols on the wall. Beautiful, flowing, full of history. For a moment he felt not hate but sadness. This war didn't have to happen. Back on Earth, Danny Ruiz worked with Priya Mehta to upgrade the gravitic lenses. They weren't just weapons anymore. They could bend light to create illusions, fake fleets, ghost signals, phantom explosions. Soon the Concordance wouldn't know what was real and what was a trick. "We're not just fighting ships," Danny said. "We're fighting their certainty." That was the real weapon. The Concordance believed in order, in hierarchy, in the idea that some species were meant to lead and others to follow. Earth believed in choice, in chaos. In the power of one person to change everything. The psychological toll grew. Concordance soldiers began reporting nightmares, visions of silent human ships appearing out of nowhere, of weapons that broke physics, of a planet that smiled while it fought. Some units refused orders. Others sent secret messages asking for peace. Vexel tried to hold the alliance together, but cracks spread fast. The Cathari Collective demanded proof that Earth was not using forbidden tech. The Orlan Syndicate suggested negotiation. Old rivalries, long buried under Concordance unity, began to surface again. Humanity had not just beaten their ships, it had shaken their faith. On Luna's surface, engineers finished reinforcing the shipyards. Solar panels glowed under the weak sunlight, powering new defense grids. Rosa Mendez walked the decks of the Liberty's Resolve, checking every system. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, drawing pictures of spaceships with wings. "We're not just protecting our home," she told her crew. "We're showing the galaxy that you don't need to rule others to be strong." And that was the truth the Concordance could not understand. Earth had no empire. It had no desire to conquer. It only wanted to be left alone, to grow, to learn, to make mistakes and fix them. But if pushed, it would fight with everything it had, not for glory, but for tomorrow. As the weeks passed, the war slowed. Skirmishes happened, but no major attacks. Both sides watched, waited, and learned. The Concordance studied human broadcasts, trying to find the source of their strength. Earth studied Concordance signals, looking for signs of division. In the end, it was not firepower that would decide the war. It was understanding. And Earth had spent a long time learning how to understand the world, and now the stars. The galaxy had come expecting slaves or savages. Instead, it found a people who built gardens in war zones, who turned pain into power, and who never stopped believing in a better day. That was the secret no weapon could copy. That was the reason Earth could smirk while the stars burned around it. Part 5. The war did not end with a bang. It ended with a question. After months of battles, near misses, and silent standoffs, the Concordance stopped attacking. Their fleets pulled back to the edge of the Sol system, not in defeat but in confusion. They had come to crush a threat. Instead, they found a mirror. Earth did not chase them. It did not gloat. It simply waited, calm and ready, like a door left open for someone to walk through. President Nora Blake made the first move. She sent a message, not through military channels, but on every public frequency, in every language the Concordance used. "We do not want your worlds," it said. "We do not want your laws, but we will share our knowledge if you share yours, not as masters and servants. As equals." The word stunned the Concordance Council. Equality was not a concept they practiced. Their alliance was built on hierarchy, older species guiding younger ones, stronger civilizations protecting weaker ones, all under the rule of consensus that often meant silence for the small. But Earth had proven it was neither small nor silent. High Arbiter Vexel read the message 3 times. Then he called for a vote. Not all agreed. Some leaders still saw humanity as dangerous, unpredictable, too wild to trust. But others, the Cathari, the Orlan, even a few from the Vexian hegemony, spoke up. "They fought with honor," said one. "They could have destroyed our ships. They chose not to." Another added, "They built wonders while we watched from afar. Perhaps we were the blind ones." So the Concordance agreed to talk, not on a warship, not in a fortress, but on neutral ground, Luna's Sea of Serenity, where humans had first walked on another world centuries ago. A dome was built there, simple and open, with no weapons, no guards, just chairs and a table under a sky full of stars. General Leo Hayes walked into the dome first, alone. He wore no uniform, just a dark jacket and boots. Behind him came Dr. Lena Ortiz, Danny Ruiz, Captain Eli Dawson, and President Blake. They did not march. They did not pose. They simply sat. Vexel entered with 3 advisors. He looked older now, his posture less rigid. He studied the humans not with suspicion, but with curiosity. "You could have demanded tribute," he said. "You won every major engagement. Why offer peace?" Blake leaned forward slightly. "Because we've been conquered before, not by aliens, but by fear, greed, and division. We learned that winning a war doesn't mean you've built a future. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want a seat at the table." The talks lasted 7 days. They spoke of technology, yes. Earth offered data on gravitic lenses and quantum comms. The Concordance shared star maps and medical advances. But they also spoke of stories. Of how humans rebuilt cities after floods. How they sang songs during blackouts, how they taught their children to look up and wonder. The Concordance listened, and for the first time they saw not a threat, but a people. No treaty was signed with grand fanfare. There were no fireworks, just a simple agreement. Earth would join the galactic community as an independent member, with full rights and no oversight. In return, humanity would help patrol the outer rim, share clean energy tech, and never use its hidden weapons unless attacked. As the Concordance delegation prepared to leave, Vexel turned to Hayes. "You knew we would come, didn't you?" Hayes gave a small smile. "We hoped you wouldn't, but we knew you might, so we got ready." "And the smirk?" Vexel asked. "Was that part of your plan too?" Hayes looked up at Earth, blue and bright in the lunar sky. "That wasn't a plan. That was just us. We've been knocked down so many times we learned to stand up smiling." Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal, but not the old normal. The war had changed everything. People still worked, still laughed, still argued, but there was a new quiet pride in how they moved. Kids played with toy ships that looked like the Iron Harvest. Farmers used leftover sensor tech to monitor soil health. Even the oceans were cleaner, thanks to Concordance filtration systems traded for Earth's fusion designs. Danny Ruiz returned to his lab, but now he worked with alien scientists over quantum links, testing new ways to heal damaged ecosystems. Priya Mehta led a team building the first joint human concordance research station near Pluto. Marcus Boone visited his brother's memorial on Titan, then helped train concordance peacekeepers in survival tactics, because even former enemies needed to stay alive out there. The hidden weapons were not dismantled. They were powered down, not out of weakness, but because they were no longer needed. Earth had proven its point. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to be ready. Years later, when new species joined the galactic community, they were told the story of Earth, not as a warning, but as a lesson. They were young, the elders would say, but they did not beg. They did not break. They built, they waited, and when the storm came, they stood. And in classrooms across the galaxy, children learned about the day the Concordance declared war, and Earth smirked like it had been waiting. Not because it loved fighting, but because it loved its home enough to protect it, quietly, fiercely, and without apology. The stars still burned. The universe was still vast and full of dangers, but Earth was no longer alone, and it never would be again.